Receivers are a crucial piece of any team. No matter how great the rest of your team is, if you can't move the ball through the air, you are done for. Today, I wanted to break down who I think are the top 10 wide receivers of all time. Press the like button if you think you know who our number one will be. Let's talk about one of the most technically sound, sure-handed receivers to ever step on an NFL field, Cris Carter. A man so synonymous with red zone dominance that he could have had a punch card for touchdowns. Catch 10, get one free. You didn't throw it near him unless you wanted 6 points, and usually that's exactly what you got. But Carter's career didn't start with greatness. It started with a thud, the kind that comes from raw talent crashing into off-the-field issues. Drafted in the 4th round of the 1987 supplemental draft by the Philadelphia Eagles, Carter had all the tools: size, hands, football IQ, but struggled with drug and alcohol addiction. In fact, his release from the Eagles in 1989 came after head coach Buddy Ryan grew tired of his off-the-field behavior. Buddy famously said, "All he does is catch touchdowns," intending it as a slight. Turns out, that line aged like fine wine. Carter got clean, got serious, and got picked up by the Minnesota Vikings, the team where he would rewrite the narrative and his career. From 1990 to 2001, he became the soul of that Vikings offense. It wasn't just his stats that popped, though they definitely did. It was the way he played. His footwork along the sideline was an art form. His ability to snatch a ball out of the air with defenders draped on him was borderline unfair. And don't even think about leaving him single covered inside the 20-yard line. That was theft. And Carter was a repeat offender. He posted 8 straight 1,000-yard seasons, made 8 Pro Bowls, and retired with 130 touchdowns, which at the time was second all-time behind Jerry Rice. That's not just elite company. That's private jet, champagne on ice, gold jacket company. He also had 4 seasons with over 120 catches, which in the pre-pass happy NFL was unheard of. In 1994 and 1995, he led the league in receptions and was a first-team All-Pro both years. In 1995, he had 122 catches. That's with defenses knowing he was getting the ball and still not being able to stop it. But Carter's greatness wasn't just about volume. It was about efficiency. He was the king of the sideline toe tap, the comeback route that always seemed to get just enough for the first, the back shoulder fade before it was trendy. He didn't waste motion. He didn't drop balls. He didn't dance in the end zone. He acted like he'd been there before, because he had, a lot. He also played a crucial mentor role to a young Randy Moss when Moss entered the league in 1998. That 15-1 Vikings team, featuring Carter, Moss, and Randall Cunningham, was electric, and Carter was still getting it done as the steady vet, catching 12 touchdowns that year at age 33. For years, Carter was overlooked because he wasn't the biggest name or the loudest voice. But watch the tape and you'll see a receiver who mastered his craft and turned every red zone possession into a crisis for opposing coordinators. Off the field, Carter's redemption arc, from a player cut for substance issues to a Hall of Fame enshrinee and respected TV analyst, makes his career all the more impressive. His Hall of Fame induction in 2013 wasn't just a celebration of stats, it was a celebration of growth, perseverance, and reinvention. Cris Carter didn't need flash. He didn't need gimmicks. He just needed a football, a sideline, and a quarterback smart enough to look his way. All he did was catch touchdowns. But those touchdowns told the story of a man who went from nearly throwing his career away to becoming one of the 10 greatest receivers of all time. If Cris Carter was the technician with hands like vice grips, Bob Hayes was a straight-up cheat code. Before Tyreek Hill was doing backflips in the end zone and making DBs look like they were running through molasses, Bullet Bob Hayes was out here breaking the game of football, quite literally. But Carter's greatness wasn't just about volume, it was about efficiency. He was the king of the sideline toe tap, the comeback route that always seemed to get just enough for the first, the back shoulder fade before it was trendy. He didn't waste motion. He didn't drop balls. He didn't dance in the end zone. He acted like he'd been there before, because he had, a lot. He also played a crucial mentor role to a young Randy Moss when Moss entered the league in 1998. That 15-1 Vikings team, featuring Carter, Moss, and Randall Cunningham, was electric, and Carter was still getting it done as the steady vet, catching 12 touchdowns that year at age 33. Let's start with this. Bob Hayes is the only man in history with both an Olympic gold medal and a Super Bowl ring. That's not a metaphor for how fast he was. That's a fact. Before he ever laced up cleats for the Dallas Cowboys, Hayes won gold in the 100-meter dash and the 4x100 relay at the 1964 Tokyo Olympics. And he did it in world record time. He ran a 10.06 on a cinder track. For comparison, that's like racing a Bugatti on gravel and still winning. When he hit the NFL, defensive coordinators quickly realized they had a problem because Hayes was doing things no one anyone had ever seen on a football field. Defensive backs, cooked. Coverage schemes, torched. He forced teams to invent zone coverage just to deal with him. That's how transformative he was. They had to literally change the way defense was played to survive. He joined the Cowboys in 1965 and immediately made the league look like a local rec league. As a rookie, he had 1,003 yards and 12 touchdowns in just 13 games. And that wasn't even his best year. In 1966, he led the league in both yards per reception and touchdowns. And he averaged nearly a touchdown every 4 catches for his career. That's not production, that's destruction. Stat nerds might point to his relatively short career or his total yardage, but this is one of those cases where the impact far outweighs the box score. Because when you watch the film, you realize that Bob Hayes was doing things that DBs didn't even have mental reps for. There was no blueprint for stopping a literal Olympic sprinter running full speed on grass in shoulder pads. He wasn't just fast, he was football fast. Straight line burners don't always translate to gridiron greatness, but Hayes had the acceleration, field awareness, and strength to turn his speed into production. He was elite on deep balls, unguardable on go routes, and a total nightmare if he ever caught a quick slant in stride. If you gave him an inch, he'd take 6 points. And let's not ignore his postseason contributions. He helped lead the Cowboys to a win in Super Bowl VI, and while he wasn't the MVP, his mere presence on the field warped defenses and opened lanes for everyone else. Defenses had to put 2 guys on him just to prevent the game from turning into a track meet. Off the field, his story wasn't without turbulence. Hayes faced personal struggles during and after his playing days, and his name wasn't called for Canton until posthumously in 2009, a long overdue honor for a guy who redefined the position. He wasn't just a receiver, he was a prototype for what the modern NFL would become: speed, space, and chaos. If you're ranking receivers by how much they changed the game, Bob Hayes might be number 1. But on this list, he lands at number 9, not because his numbers don't stack up, but because his impact goes beyond the stat sheet. He was a pioneer, a trailblazer, a human rocket in shoulder pads. And without Bullet Bob Hayes, there is no Tyreek Hill and no Randy Moss. He walked so they could fly. Marvin Harrison didn't talk much, he didn't dance, he didn't chirp, he didn't flex, but what he did do quietly and efficiently was torch your defense for 120 yards and a pair of touchdowns, shake your best corner out of his cleats, and jog back to the huddle like he was clocking in for another day at the office. He was surgical, he was clinical, he was cold-blooded, and with Peyton Manning throwing him the ball, Harrison became the NFL's version of a machine learning algorithm, precise, deadly, and seemingly incapable of error. Let's start with the stats, because they're filthy. Over 13 seasons, all with the Indianapolis Colts, Harrison racked up 1,102 catches, 14,580 yards, and 128 touchdowns. He led the league in receptions twice, touchdowns once, and cracked the 100 catch mark 4 times. But the real insanity? In 2002, Marvin had 143 catches for 1,722 yards and 11 touchdowns, a single season receptions record that stood for nearly 2 decades. And it wasn't just quantity, it was how he did it. His routes were sharper than a Ginsu knife. He could cut on a dime without losing speed. One minute he's sprinting full speed on a go route, and the next he's breaking it off on a comeback so clean, the corner's still backpedaling into next week. If route running was a martial art, Marvin Harrison was a grandmaster. He also had arguably the greatest quarterback-wide receiver connection in history. His chemistry with Peyton Manning was so locked in, they could have passed notes in class without looking. They combined for 112 touchdowns, the most ever between a QB and receiver when Harrison retired. Peyton called him the smartest receiver he ever played with, and that's coming from one of the biggest football nerds in history. But what makes Harrison truly special is the consistency. From 1999 to 2006, an 8-year stretch, he averaged 99 catches, 1,330 yards, and 12 touchdowns per season. That's not a hot streak, that's a Hall of Fame resume on loop. Critics will say he benefited from playing with Peyton. Sure, that helps, but let's not get it twisted, Peyton benefited from Marvin just as much. No one was getting open more cleanly, no one was creating separation faster, and no one was more trustworthy on 3rd and 8 with the game on the line. Reggie Wayne, Dallas Clark, even Edgerrin James, they all got easier looks because defenses were terrified of number 88. Marvin's game didn't have a ton of flash, but that was part of the charm. He let his routes do the talking. No self-promotion, no drama. He didn't need to look like a killer, he just quietly stacked bodies every Sunday. Of course, his post-career reputation got a little murky. There were off-field rumors, legal investigations, and stories that made people raise eyebrows. But none of that ever touched his on-field legacy. And when it comes to football, Harrison was one of the cleanest route runners and most relentlessly productive players to ever do it. He was the blueprint for guys like Keenan Allen and Justin Jefferson, smooth, efficient, and ice cold under pressure. Marvin Harrison didn't just play wide receiver. He played chess while everyone else was playing checkers. If football had a version of a first ballot walk-in-the-door Hall of Famer with no need for debate, Larry Fitzgerald would be holding that key. He's the wide receiver equivalent of a Rolex. Timeless, smooth, and built to last. For nearly 2 decades, Fitzgerald was the gold standard for what a receiver should be. On the field, in the locker room, and in the eyes of every defensive back who had to line up across from him. Let's start with the resume. 17 seasons, 1,432 receptions, second all-time. 17,492 receiving yards, also second all-time. 121 touchdowns. He had 9 1,000-yard seasons, played in 11 Pro Bowls, and somehow, in all those years, he dropped a grand total of 29 passes. That's not a typo. That's a career drop rate of under 1%. Let's put that in perspective. If a ball touched Fitzgerald's hands, it basically had to file paperwork and get divine approval to hit the ground. It just didn't happen. He caught contested passes like the defender wasn't even there. His hands weren't just reliable, they were historic. But Fitzgerald was more than just a stat machine. He was a technician, a physical freak, and a total menace after the catch. Early in his career, he played with a reckless abandon, breaking tackles, stiff-arming corners into retirement, and fighting for every inch like it was life or death. Later in his career, he evolved, shifting to the slot, becoming a chain-moving savant, and outthinking younger, faster DBs with a combination of football IQ and Jedi-level body control. And let's talk quarterbacks, because if there's a knock on Fitz, it's that he did all this without a Hall of Fame passer throwing him the ball. Outside of a few electric years with Kurt Warner, the man had to catch spirals from the likes of Josh McCown, Matt Leinart, John Skelton, Kevin Kolb, and a rotating cast of dudes who were basically NFL fan fiction. Despite that, Fitzgerald never complained, never demanded a trade, never stirred drama. He just showed up every Sunday and balled out. The kind of guy who could have thrived in any era. You want 1970s physicality? He had that. You want early 2000s jump ball ability? Fitz invented that. You want modern slot production with old school toughness? Fitz did that in his sleep at 35. But if you want his signature moment, the ultimate oh my god, this dude is him performance, rewind to the 2008 postseason. Larry went nuclear. In 4 games, he caught 30 passes for 546 yards and 7 touchdowns, including 2 scores in the Super Bowl. He took over that playoff run like a man possessed. The only reason he doesn't have a ring is because Ben Roethlisberger made the throw of his life with 35 seconds left. Otherwise, that postseason would have gone down as the greatest by a wide receiver ever, full stop. And let's not forget, the man also blocked, hustled like a rookie, and tackled defenders after interceptions like he was trying to make the Pro Bowl as a safety. The man played like his reputation was on the line every snap, and somehow over 17 years, he never put a foot wrong. If you were building a wide receiver in a lab and wanted him to dominate the game and represent your franchise with dignity, class, and elite performance, you'd clone Larry Fitzgerald. His legacy isn't just in the numbers, it's in the way he carried himself, the way he made impossible catches routine, and the way he proved that greatness doesn't need a loudmouth or a flashy celebration. He was the ultimate professional, a highlight reel with a heart of gold, and he might just be the best wide receiver to never win a Super Bowl. If this list was about entertainment value, Terrell Owens might be number 1. If it was about physical dominance, he'd be top 3. But since we're here to talk about the greatest wide receivers of all time, a mix of production, impact, and pure ability, T.O. comfortably lands at number 6. And honestly, he might still be mad about it. Terrell Owens was a walking highlight reel and a one-man soap opera. But behind the headlines, Sharpie autographs, pom-pom celebrations, driveway workouts, and press conferences defending his quarterback, there was an undeniable truth. T.O. was an absolute monster on the football field. Let's do the numbers. 1,078 receptions, 15,934 yards, 153 touchdowns. That's 3rd all-time in scores, and only Rice and Fitzgerald racked up more receiving yards. He posted 9 1,000-yard seasons, made 6 Pro Bowls, and was named a first-team All-Pro 5 times. And he did it all while playing for 5 different franchises, feuding with quarterbacks, clashing with coaches, and basically daring the media to cancel him before that was even a thing. He entered the league in 1996 as a 3rd-round pick pick out of UT Chattanooga, playing in the shadow of Jerry Rice in San Francisco. And for a while, he was just a promising young receiver until he wasn't just promising anymore. He was terrifying. In 2000, he dropped 1,451 yards and 13 TDs on the league and never looked back. He played angry, like the defense owed him money. He'd body corners at the line, outmuscle safeties downfield, and embarrass secondaries who dared press him. T.O. was 6'3", 225, built like a power forward, ran a 4.4, and had the footwork of a slot receiver. He was a mismatch against everyone everywhere. You couldn't jam him, couldn't zone him, couldn't guard him one-on-one without holding. If you didn't respect him before the snap, you were getting mossed. And if you did, well, you were still getting mossed, just angrier. And say what you want about the drama, but the man showed up in the biggest moments. None bigger than Super Bowl 39 when he came back just 7 weeks after breaking his leg and tearing a ligament in his ankle, and then proceeded to torch the Patriots for 9 catches and 122 yards on one leg in the Super Bowl. The Eagles lost, but T.O. walked off that field as the baddest dude in the stadium. Yet somehow the league and media made him wait 3 years for the Hall of Fame. Why? Because he was too loud, too honest, too extra? Because he did sit-ups in his driveway? Get real. If Jerry Rice was the model student, Terrell Owens was the brilliant troublemaker in the back of the class who still aced every test and made the teacher nervous. The truth is, T.O. was never the problem. He was just unapologetically himself in a league that didn't like that. And despite being a distraction or bad for the locker room, he still produced everywhere he went. San Francisco, Philly, Dallas, Buffalo, Cincinnati, didn't matter. He'd show up, cause a scene, score 10 touchdowns, and dip. He played with a chip on his shoulder the size of Levi's Stadium, and he carried that energy onto every field he stepped on. Say what you want, but no one wanted to tackle Terrell Owens in the open field. No one wanted to guard him for 4 quarters, and no one could ignore him, on or off the field. Bottom line, T.O. was inevitable. Whether he was celebrating on the Star in Dallas or torching your team's cornerback, you watched. You hated him. You feared him. And deep down, you wished he played for you. Antonio Brown didn't just play wide receiver, he put defenders in therapy sessions. At his peak, he was a technician with the explosiveness of a firecracker and the swagger of a rock star. He was small, but played like he was 6'4" with a vendetta. He wasn't the fastest guy in the league, but he moved like his joints were programmed by NASA. He had footwork that could cross up a shadow and hands that vacuumed up passes in double coverage like it was nothing. And for a solid 6-year stretch, nobody, and I mean nobody, was better. From 2013 to 2018, Antonio Brown averaged 114 catches, 1,524 yards, and 11 touchdowns per season. That's not just great production, that's video game numbers. In that span, he led the league in receptions twice, receiving yards twice, and touchdowns once. He had 6 straight 100-catch seasons, 6 straight Pro Bowls, and 4 first-team All-Pro selections. He was on the cover of Madden and made cornerbacks look like interns trying to guard a heat-seeking missile. He wasn't just getting open, he was creating space where space didn't exist. Press him, he'd leave you in the dirt. Play off, he'd eat up cushion and break your ankles on a dime. Zone, he'd sit perfectly between defenders like he had a GPS for coverages. AB didn't need a big frame, he had elite football IQ, route precision, and the best toe tap game of the decade. That sideline ballet he perfected in Pittsburgh, that was art. And let's not downplay his impact on that Steelers offense. With Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, and AB, Pittsburgh had a big three that looked ready to take over the league. And for a moment, they did. But while Ben was aging and Bell was holding out, Antonio Brown was still out there embarrassing secondaries week after week. Of course, the other side of Antonio Brown's story is the one that tanked his reputation. The erratic behavior, the locker room meltdowns, the Facebook Live during Mike Tomlin's speech, the foot frosting cryo chamber incident, the Raiders helmet debacle, the Patriots saga, the Buccaneers walk-off shirtless exit, the rap songs, the lawsuits. The list is longer than some DBs' careers. And unfortunately, it derailed what could have been an even more legendary run. But make no mistake, on the field, AB was as elite as they come. At his best, he was unguardable, unstoppable, and unmatched. He made average QBs look great and great QBs look legendary. He showed up in big games, got open when no one should have been open, and made toe drag swag a religion. Had he stayed on track, Brown might be pushing top 3 territory. But even with the career nosedive, his peak was so high and his impact so undeniable that you can't make a top 5 receiver list without his name on it. Say what you want about Antonio Brown, and trust me, the internet already has, but between the whistles, he was a football genius in cleats, a storm you couldn't contain, a wide receiver who for a few years made the NFL look like his personal mixtape. In a time when most receivers looked like gym teachers and offenses ran the ball 40 times a game out of obligation, Lance Alworth showed up looking like he'd been sent from the future. A sleek, lightning-fast receiver with Olympic speed, soft hands, and ballerina-level footwork, Alworth wasn't just good for his era, he was the era. And more importantly, he helped redefine what a wide receiver could be. They called him Bambi because of his grace and agility, but don't get it twisted, Bambi had bite. From 1963 to 1970, Alworth absolutely dominated the AFL, making defenders look like they were stuck in a lower frame rate. This man averaged 18.9 yards per catch for his career. Let me repeat that. A career average of 18.9 yards per catch. That's not just vertical, that's intercontinental. In a league that was still figuring out how to use the forward pass creatively, Alworth was already playing wide receiver chess while most DBs were learning checkers. He ran smooth, effortless routes. He'd glide past corners like he was skating on air, then explode upfield into a second gear they didn't even know existed. And once the ball was in the air, game over. He tracked deep balls like he had radar. Here's the stat line that makes your jaw drop. From 1963 to 1969, Alworth posted 7 straight 1,000-yard seasons in a 14-game schedule. That might not sound wild by today's standards, but in the 60s, 1,000 yards receiving was like winning MVP. It just didn't happen unless you were superhuman. He led the AFL in receiving yards 3 times, touchdowns 3 times, and posted a whopping 10 games with over 200 receiving yards, which was unheard of at the time. And it's not just that he was good, it's that he was the first truly dominant deep threat. Without Alworth, there's no Cliff Branch, no Randy Moss, no Deshaun Jackson or Tyreek Hill. He was the prototype, the original burner who could also go over the middle, make contested catches, and turn routine plays into fireworks. Alworth did most of his damage with the San Diego Chargers, where he and QB John Hadle torched AFL defenses on a weekly basis. He was the 1963 AFL MVP, the only wide receiver in history to win league MVP without also playing defense, returning kicks, or curing cancer during halftime. That alone should raise some eyebrows. He finished his career with 542 catches, 10,266 yards, and 85 touchdowns, all while playing in an era that barely knew what a spread offense was. And when he joined the Dallas Cowboys late in his career, he snagged a ring in Super Bowl VI, becoming one of the few players to succeed at the highest level in both the AFL and NFL. But more than the numbers, Lance Alworth was style and substance before the league even had room for it. He wasn't big, he wasn't brash, he didn't need to talk. His game spoke loud enough. The Hall of Fame inducted him on the first ballot, and when guys like Jerry Rice and Steve Largent say he was their inspiration, that's all you need to know. Alworth didn't just belong in the modern game, he would have thrived in it. His speed, intelligence, and hands would have made him a wide receiver on every team in any era. If the 1960s were the dawn of the passing game, Alworth was the sunrise. If Jerry Rice was the perfect machine and Terrell Owens was the emotional wrecking ball, then Randy Moss was a lightning strike in shoulder pads. He didn't run routes so much as he hovered. He didn't jump, he levitated. And when the ball was in the air, every DB on the field had the same thought: oh no. Randy Moss didn't just change the game, he shattered it. He made defensive coordinators rethink their entire playbooks. He made quarterbacks look like gods. He made average throws turn into 70-yard touchdowns. And he made cornerbacks question why they ever picked this career in the first place. Drafted in 1998, famously slipping to the 21st pick because of character concerns, which we'll get to, Moss entered the league like a meteor impact. As a rookie, he had 17 touchdowns on just 69 catches for 1,313 yards. That's not a season, that's a biblical event. He averaged 19 yards per catch and looked like he was moving at a different speed than everyone else. That 98 Vikings offense with Cris Carter mentoring him and Randall Cunningham launching moonballs became the most unstoppable force in football, and Moss was the crown jewel.
He wasn't just fast, he was deep space fast. He didn't need to run a full route tree because the threat of the go route alone broke defenses. Corners would give him 10 yards of cushion and it still wasn't enough. You could bracket him with a corner and a safety and he'd still find a way to come down with the ball, often over both of them with one hand and a smirk. His career numbers: 982 catches, 15,292 yards, and 156 touchdowns. That last number, 156 TDs, is second only to Jerry Rice, and 51 more than Terrell Owens. That's not just longevity, that's nuclear production. He had 10 1,000-yard seasons, was a 4-time first-team All-Pro, made 6 Pro Bowls, and led the league in touchdown receptions 5 times. Oh, and remember that 2007 season with Tom Brady and the Patriots? Randy turned the league into a video game. 23 touchdowns, which is still an NFL record. 1,493 yards, 93 catches, and probably 1,000 broken souls in the secondary. That team went 16-0 in the regular season, and Moss was the walking mismatch that made it all possible. But Randy Moss was more than stats. He was culture. He gave us the phrase, "You got mossed." He made casual fans care about deep routes. He inspired a generation of kids who couldn't wait to put on gloves and jump over their friends in the backyard. He played with an edge, and when he was motivated, he might have been the most unstoppable offensive weapon in the history of the league. Sure, he bounced around. Vikings, Raiders, Patriots, Titans, back to the Vikings, and finally the 49ers. And he had his moments of being, let's say, less than engaged. The infamous "I play when I want to play" quote, the mooning celebration in Green Bay, the hot dog in the locker, the helmet toss. Randy wasn't always polished. He didn't want to be. But even with the drama, when Moss laced up, you knew something insane was about to happen. He was the guy who could flip a game on one play, who made defensive backs look like junior varsity. And for all the noise, he was beloved by teammates, respected by coaches, and feared by every defensive coordinator in the league. Randy Moss was the football version of a nuclear warhead. All you could do was hope he didn't go off. And most of the time, he did.
Before there was Moss, before there was Rice, before the term wide receiver was even a thing, there was Don Hutson. And he wasn't just ahead of his time. He was from another galaxy. The man played in leather helmets during the Great Depression, when offenses thought throwing the ball more than 10 times a game was borderline reckless. And yet, in that primitive era of fullbacks and mud puddles, Hutson was out here running clean routes, catching touchdown passes like he was on a Madden cheat code, and putting up numbers that didn't even make sense for the era. He joined the Green Bay Packers in 1935, and from the moment he stepped on the field, it was like the league suddenly switched from AM radio to high definition. For 11 seasons, all with the Packers, Hutson was pure domination. He led the league in receptions 8 times, in receiving yards 7 times, and in receiving touchdowns 9 times. And keep in mind, these were 11-game seasons, where most teams thought passing was something you only did in desperation. In 1942, this man dropped 74 catches for 1,211 yards and 17 touchdowns in 11 games. That would be elite today. Back then, it was like watching someone invent the wheel during the Daytona 500.
And Hutson wasn't just productive, he was a revolutionary. There was no route tree in the 1930s, no positional coaching, no Instagram reels breaking down footwork. Don Hutson created the route tree. He was the first guy to use quick cuts, deceptive footwork, and separation like a science. Defensive backs didn't know what to do with him because no one had ever seen anything like it. It got so bad that teams had to invent new defensive coverages, zone defense, press coverage, double teams, all just to slow one man down. And as if that wasn't enough, he also played defense. He led the league in interceptions in 1940. He returned punts, he kicked extra points. He was basically Cooper Kupp, Ed Reed, and Justin Tucker all jammed into one undersized, unstoppable package. The league wasn't built for someone like Don Hutson. It had to evolve because of him. He won 2 MVPs back-to-back in 1941 and 1942 and made the All-Pro team 8 times. But honestly, his numbers don't even tell the full story, because the most important stat is this. Before Hutson, receivers were just ends who blocked and occasionally caught a pass. After Hutson, they were weapons, stars, game changers. He changed the role, the expectations, and the very concept of the passing game. Without Don Hutson, there is no Jerry Rice, no Randy Moss, no Antonio Brown, no Tyreek Hill. He didn't just break the mold. He was the guy they used to make the mold. Don Hutson is the grandfather of wide receiver greatness. He played like a man from the future who wandered into the past and decided to leave everyone else in the dust. He belongs on the Mount Rushmore of NFL legends not just because he was the best in his era, but because he invented the position as we know it today.
Jerry Rice is the wide receiver position. End of story. If football had a dictionary, his face would be next to the word dominance. If the Hall of Fame had tiers, he'd have his own floor. Nobody, and I mean nobody, combined longevity, consistency, and mind-blowing production like Jerry Rice. He didn't rely on raw speed. He didn't have freakish size. He wasn't the loudest, the flashiest, or the most physically intimidating, but somehow, every single Sunday for 2 decades, Rice outran, outworked, and outlasted every defender the NFL threw at him. Drafted 16th overall by the 49ers in 1985 out of Mississippi Valley State, a small HBCU in the middle of nowhere, Rice entered the league with something to prove, and he proved it every single year. From his first catch to his final route at age 42, Rice was on a mission to bury your favorite cornerback in film room shame. His routes were meticulous, his hands were magnets, his work ethic was the stuff of myth, the kind of guy who trained on hills so steep they'd give goats vertigo. The numbers? Absurd. Let's just state them plainly. 1,549 receptions, 22,895 yards, and 208 total touchdowns. All NFL records. And not just barely records. He's got more receiving yards than the next two guys combined during parts of their careers. He had 14 seasons with over 1,000 receiving yards, and in 1987, a strike-shortened year where they only played 12 games, he had 22 touchdowns. That's nearly 2 per game. His 1995 season at age 33, he put up 122 catches, 1,848 yards, and 15 touchdowns. Most receivers are on the decline at that age. Rice was just styling on people.
And the rings? Oh, he's got those too. 3-time Super Bowl champion.
In the big game, he was automatic. In Super Bowl 23, he caught 11 passes for 215 yards and a touchdown. And he wasn't even the one who caught the game winner. He followed that up with 148 yards and 3 touchdowns in Super Bowl 24, and another score in 29. Every time he stepped on the biggest stage, he delivered like Amazon Prime with a grudge. He played with 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Joe Montana and Steve Young, and made both of them better. But don't let that take away from his greatness. Rice's excellence wasn't propped up by a system or carried by a coach. He would have been elite anywhere, in any offense, with any quarterback. He showed it later in his career when he joined the Oakland Raiders at age 39 and still dropped 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns, just to remind the world he wasn't done. But more than the stats or the accolades, what separates Jerry Rice is this. He made greatness routine. He made dominance look boring. You watched him rack up another 10-catch, 150-yard, 2-touchdown game and didn't even blink. Because that's just what Jerry Rice did. He set the bar so impossibly high that no one's even come close to touching it since. Moss had the flash, T.O. had the fire, A.B. had the footwork, but Rice had everything, and he had it longer, better, and with more discipline than anyone before or since. There's a reason he's the standard by which every wide receiver is measured. The reason coaches say, be like Jerry. The reason he's not just considered the greatest receiver ever, but arguably the greatest player in NFL history. Because Jerry Rice didn't just break records, he rewrote what was possible. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to press the like button and let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. If you really enjoyed, subscribe and check out our last upload about the most insane fights in NFL history.